So, Tony, our second tube is of indeterminate length. So you can tell
Cut
us
us off when you need to.
I mean, prior to 10.
prior to 10, the one that comes right out. So,
Okay.
so you just tell us when to pull the plug.
All right, I will. Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples on this beautiful Sunday morning. It's great to have you all with us this morning. It's great to have those of us that are here together in the sanctuary. That includes Daniel Goodsid in the tech room, and John Forsyth, our tech committee chair, watching. Scott and Karen here with our music, and our worship associate, Lena Neal, and you. I like to imagine that you are here with us, and I am grateful for your presence this morning. Lena has a few words of welcome and some announcements, and then we'll begin our service.
Good morning, and thank you, Reverend Tony. As your worship associate for this morning, I'm very pleased to be with you wherever this service finds you. We are a welcoming congregation, freely seeking intellectual and spiritual growth. We strive to create a larger community of peace, justice, and love. By joining in worship and in online opportunities that offer education, reflection, and discussion. If you are new to us and are interested in finding out more about this wonderful congregation, we urge you to check out our website or send an email to the office at uunaples.org. We'd love to hear from you. Please check the email notices also that are sent out each week. And I have a couple of special announcements to share with you this morning. One, don't forget, our wonderful Wednesday programming will be back this Wednesday, September 9 at 7 p.m. with a presentation from Jean Goldberg on the politicalization of scientific issues in the age of COVID-19. In addition to our regular online programming, the first of our Common Read books for 2020, An Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States, will be discussed in 3 90-minute Zoom sessions beginning this Thursday, September 10 at 3:30 p.m. And then third, on Thursday, the weekly Q&A with our minister continues with opportunities to learn more about Unitarian Universalism and about this congregation. So please join Reverend Tony. Details for these and so many other upcoming Zoom opportunities at UUGN are available if you are signed up for our weekly and monthly news. Now, let's take a deep breath and center ourselves for worship this morning with our prelude from Scott and Karen.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Day is a breaking in Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Day is a breaking in my soul.
Welcome to this place of possibility. This is love's hearth, the home of hope, a refuge for minds in search of truth unfolding, ever beautiful, ever strange. Here, compassion is our shelter, freedom our protection from the storms of bigotry and hate. In this place, may we find comfort and courage. Here may our sight become vision to the unseen, to glimpse the good that is yet to be. Let's join together in our chalice lighting response on the screen. May this flame stir our hearts and remind us of our mission to be truly welcoming, to grow in mind and spirit, and to widen the circle of peace, justice, and love. And I hope you'll join me in singing our opening hymn, For All That Is Our Life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. A few months ago, I got a call from my colleague, the Reverend Allison Farnham, who is the former minister at our Fort Myers congregation, now living in the Chicago area and pursuing an interest in prison ministry. Allison is still tied very closely to the Coalition of Immokalee Workers and the Alliance for Fair Food. And she called to give me a gentle nudge. She called to let me know how the people of Immokalee were struggling with the virus and how it was becoming a hotspot in the state of Florida, in many ways because of a lack of response of the state to urgent calls from the coalition and from other organizations to provide needed support for the community. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers is a worker-based human rights organization internationally recognized for its achievements in fighting human trafficking and gender-based violence at work. The CIW is also recognized for pioneering in the design and development of worker-driven social responsibility, a worker-led, market-enforced approach to protection of human rights in corporate supply chains. It is a remarkable success story, and yet always in need of support. So in response to the COVID crisis in Immokalee, Allison was suggesting that we, as a congregation, geographically close as any other UU congregation to the Immokalee growing fields, submit a grant application to the UUA for financial support in a time of tragedy. And so we did, and the UUA responded rapidly to that and granted us $5,000 to send on to the Alliance and Coalition. And this congregation generously, through the gifts that came in at the beginning of the pandemic, were able to match that grant and send that cash, that money, and actually hand that money to the folks at the Alliance and Coalition. So for that, I am grateful. I am grateful to you for your generosity and for your care. And I don't want to stand in for the Coalition. I want to introduce to you Lupe Gonzalo, who will speak for the Coalition. Lupe is a wonderful speaker who has been with us in our worship services in the past. She spoke eloquently at the vigil we held after the Charlottesville incident and has spoken across the county, not just for worker rights, but to speak up and be in solidarity with all other justice issues that have come forward. And so I would like to introduce to you Lupe Gonzalo.
A los líderes de fe de la Iglesia UU, gracias por dar el espacio a los trabajadores agrícolas o del campo en su congregación. Mi nombre es Lupe Gonzalo, soy parte del staff de la Coalición de Trabajadores en Immokalee. Cada año en Labor Day reconocemos el gran trabajo de trabajadores agrícolas, especialmente a sus vecinos, trabajadores de Immokalee. Como muchos de ustedes saben, los trabajadores agrícolas empezamos una lucha para mejorar las condiciones de trabajo que teníamos para eliminar el abuso, el acoso sexual y esclavitud moderna en nuestro trabajo. Ha sido una lucha con muchos obstáculos, pero con victorias muy importantes. Pero lo más importante es que contamos con el apoyo de líderes y comunidades de fe como ustedes, que han usado su plataforma para que los trabajadores lleguemos a acuerdos con grandes corporaciones y eso ha traído cambios importantes a nuestro trabajo. Pero ahora, en tiempos de COVID, hemos visto cómo la falta de derechos de los trabajadores fuera del programa por comida justa han afectado a miles de trabajadores agrícolas alrededor de todo el país y aún en comunidades más vulnerables como Immokalee. Y lo que hace más difícil es que los gobiernos, tanto local como estatal, ignoran las necesidades que los trabajadores enfrentamos. Por eso, la coalición sigue buscando recursos para apoyar a trabajadores agrícolas. Desde que empezó la pandemia, hemos hecho el llamado al gobernador para traer pruebas a Immokalee Hemos distribuido alrededor de 35,000 mascarillas, desinfectantes y otros recursos a trabajadores. Seguimos buscando el apoyo. Por eso, para nosotros en Labor Day, no solo queremos reconocer a los trabajadores esenciales, pero también invitamos a ustedes a seguir apoyando a la coalición en la lucha por los derechos humanos, todos los días del año, porque no solo somos esenciales un día en el año. También queremos agradecer a la Iglesia UU por las donaciones que han dado a la coalición y que ayuda a que los trabajadores puedan tener la información necesaria, los recursos necesarios, y eso hace mucho más fácil nuestro trabajo. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. And thanks to Lupe for those words. Thanks to you for your generosity. What echoes in my mind is that our farm workers and our laborers and our frontline workers across the country are not essential just for one Labor Day weekend, but for every day. And they don't demand our support, but we should demand our own support of those people who make our lives easier. So thank you for the coalition for being a part of this service, for being part of a new labor movement. And thank you again. Let's center ourselves into a time of quiet and sharing by singing Spirit of Life. We honor each of you this day in your daily struggles, in this time of separation, with issues of connection, with issues of health, with issues of hope. It's a difficult time, and we feel the lack of human connection. Those tissues, those ligaments, whatever it is, the connective tissue that binds us together and gives us a sense not only of who we are together, but of hope. I want to share with you a week later that Walter Noyes is still recovering at Physicians Regional, still working hard. He was pretty feisty this week, got himself off of a ventilator and the feeding tube, and is doing pretty well. I'm not sure whether he's in his private room or not yet, but it seems to be that's the direction he's going. So we're grateful for that. I want you to take a minute to think about folks that are important to you, that you're holding in your own hearts and minds. And perhaps you can speak the names out loud of those that you want to connect with in some way. And if you've been waiting for this moment to light your own chalice, then a candle of hope, of connection, and I urge you to do that. Let's take some time together in silence and in love. And please join me in the spirit of meditation. Spirit of life and love, grateful for all the ways that we do connect, whether it's here on Sunday morning or through our Zoom meetings or over the phone. We encourage each and every one to continue to do the work of community in that way. We're grateful for those who are on the front lines working for the cause of health and freedom. Most of us have the wisdom gained over our years of experience and learning to know what is good and what is right. We look at our Unitarian Universalist principles and nod our heads, affirming that for the most part they reflect our deepest values and aspirations. Yet we often struggle to find the will to move from places of comfort and safety towards a life lived in full solidarity with the rich diversity of the earth and all its people. We get stuck sometimes, wishing there were clearer charts to help us navigate through the dangers and difficulties of mistrust, hatred, and division, forgetting perhaps that the old charts are still good if we would stop, take a deep breath, read them more carefully, and follow them closely with care and intention. Not simply an intellectual exercise nor a journey one can take alone. It is the yearning of many hearts working together towards something called the common good. If we listen to our own inner voice and to the voices of our fellow travelers, we will know that the way requires commitment to work through the inevitable missteps and wrong turns, forgiving ourselves and each other as we move towards a responsible world community fashioned in the spirit of peace, freedom, justice, and love.
This is a reflection entitled, I Thought I Knew, by the Reverend Miguel Estrada, who is the pastor at Peace River Presbytery's Mission Pinel in Immokalee. Pastor Miguel writes about his experience fasting alongside the Coalition of Immokalee workers during last week's 5-day Freedom Fast in New York City. He writes, I thought I knew what it is to work hard until I saw the people who do it in the fields. What it is to be abused until I witnessed the exploitation that befalls agricultural workers. What it is to be poor until I measured how little farm workers receive for their hard work. What it is to sacrifice for others until I saw the commitment of a farm worker to his family and community. What it is to suffer until I knew the physical and emotional pain of agricultural workers. What it is to endure hunger until I sat down at the table with people returning from work in the fields. What it is to feel pain until I heard the stories of resilience of the peasants. I also thought I knew what is fair until I realized that through my lifestyle, I am complicit by action and omission in a system that enslaves, abuses, exploits, and sacrifices many for the well-being of a few. What it is to be happy until I saw the smiling face of an agricultural worker after a long day's work. What it is to enjoy the simplest things of life until I heard the frank and spontaneous laughter of the children of the farm workers. What it is to be brave until I witnessed how the peasants put a stop to the abuser. What it is to be in solidarity until the one who had little shared her bread with me when I was hungry. What it is to have faith and hope until I accompanied the farm workers on the road in the fight for justice, even in the face of opposition. The time of reflection continues. Surely I will continue to find that there are many other things that I think I already know, but that I will have to relearn.
The silence in this room is overwhelming sometimes. But your silence has actually been non-existent in your generosity to both the efforts of the congregation and our fundraising. So thank you again for that. You've been quite loud. And once again, every week we ask for that little bit more, understanding how much this place means to each one of us, how it can hold us together in times of dis-ease, how it can lift us up in times of triumph, how important community is. So for that and for the ongoing work of this congregation, I hope that you'll perhaps sit down and write a check to the congregation and send it in, or go to our website and push the donate button. The morning's offering for all that you are and we are together will be gratefully received.
Traveling down this cold town road, I listen to my rubber tires whine. It's goodbye to Buckeye and White Sycamore, I'm leaving you behind.
said, that's a strange tattoo you've got on the side of your head. I said, that's the blueprint left by the cold. A little more and I'd be dead. I love the rumble and I love the dark. I love the cool of the sleigh. I'm going down a new road looking for a job, just traveling and looking high. Sing with the angel band.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Happy Labor Day, everyone. Often a day when we think about gathering in groups and having a cookout or some other activity in community. And of course now that's not possible. But tomorrow does offer a respite of sort to many to just take a deep breath away from the labors that call them every day. I always find that the journalism that appeals to me tells stories. Stories across the political spectrum. And many of the stories over the past number of years have involved people struggling to make a living, whether their jobs have moved away, whether they come from a background that makes it difficult and doesn't provide them with the resources they need to sort of take that next step. Whatever it is, the stories touch my heart. I think more recently this week, in fact, of a story I heard on the radio of a young single mother in Charlotte, North Carolina, who has 4 kids. And of course this week was back to school week. And in order to be able to pay the bills, she has to work. But she has no support, really, locally. Her sister was able to help earlier in this situation, but also has to work. So there she is, having to leave her children to go to virtual school in their own home leaving it to their oldest child to make sure that all the other three are doing what they need to do to keep up in school, and the pain and the struggle that that woman felt to walk out the door, to go to her job as a cashier at a grocery store in order to just keep things going. When we think of living in poverty, sometimes we think of homeless people. We think of people sort of waiting for something to happen, but many, many people in the United States are what are called working poor, working full-time, many of them part-time, doing what they can to piece things together and still living sort of within the range of the poverty level. And in a nation in this time, it just seems incongruous to who we are as a people and what we aspire to be as a nation. Joseph Campbell once sort of provided the illustration of the different eras of humankind, at least since the Middle Ages. He talked about the tallest buildings. And if you were to approach a medieval town or city, you would find that the tallest building was the cathedral, representing a spiritual center for the people. And in the 1700s, if you were to approach a city or town, you would notice that the tallest building was the castle. In the modern era, the tallest buildings are skyscrapers, representing the wealth of our economic system and of our commercial enterprises. It is what we are. It is how we have evolved as a culture. And yet we have lost some of our beginnings, where the system now calls for government to step away even further. And we've lost that spiritual, moral center that can hold us together. There was once and is now a labor movement that provides checks and balances to the strength of our economic capitalist system. Back in the 40s and 50s, and the power of the labor unions really held big business in check by offering ways for the worker to share in the bounty of the growth of this nation, always remembering that the disparity between the dominant culture and people on the margins, it was never good. But even then, there was a recognition that we had to be vigilant. Walter Reuther, the United Auto Workers leader, wrote back then that the cause of freedom is on trial in America, and American democracy is on trial in the eyes of the world. Doesn't that ring familiar right now? As a nation, he wrote, we must determine now, once and for all, whether we believe in the United States Constitution, which guarantees the rights of all citizens, whether we are willing to act in the knowledge that all men are free and have the right to exercise the privileges of freedom, whether we are prepared to give practical substance to our noble professions in the belief of the worth and dignity of each individual. More recently, Greg Asped, one of the founders of the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, wrote, if we, as Americans, are to protect the fragile progress towards ever greater social justice that we have made across the generations, we must fight together in a broad and inclusive movement to protect our rights, immigrant rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, civil rights, labor rights, and our rights to health care, our rights to religious freedom, and our right to a clean and sustainable environment. our right to a fair and equitable economy, and more, all of our human rights. If each of those sectors faces the challenges alone, we will be weak, we'll be on the defensive, and we may lose ground. Together, however, we can define the agenda, one that fosters a vision of universal human rights, and we can win. Labor is a strength in this nation that needs to be supported. Organizations like the Coalition, recognized for their innovative work in lifting up people on the margins who have been abused by our system. We need to support that, as we have as a congregation. Unfortunately, from the 1980s on, the system pushing towards a more free economy, a free market, have also not held a moral center. While there are some exceptions to that, the recovery from all the various recessions always seemed to favor those on the higher ends of the earning curve and on higher ends of wealth. The middle class has declined, and those on the margins continue to struggle to find a foothold. Wage stagnation and the increasing number of people who are working yet still poor are significant challenges for us as a nation. One recent study found that there is not a single congressional district in the nation where a full-time minimum wage worker could afford a 2-bedroom apartment. How is that possible? It is about freedom, really, and certainly economic freedom, but not just for those who are have positions of power in an economic system, but for everyone. If we advocate for the freedom of the people, then the people need the resources to exercise that freedom and not be limited. The Unitarian Universalist Association has, on many occasions, created resolutions that call for our attention to equity in human relations and in the workforce. Many of our principles call us to this: the worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, including within our economic system. The use of democracy in our congregations and in our nation. We can't ignore the harm caused by a system that gives control of the wealth and resources to a very small percentage of people, while many others, including those who carry out the work of the world, left to struggle for survival. Our sources and our principles compel us to act. I urge you to look at some of those resolutions, to dive into your Unitarian Universalist history and look closely at what we as a congregation and we as individuals might do. And I think you can understand what that might be, to think about where we spend our money, how we invest, how we might invest more in communities of color, how we might look more carefully at the things we buy and where they're from. There are so many ways that to sit and say, well, I don't know what to do is not an adequate answer. The Reverend Richard Gilbert wrote a book in the late 90s and was revised a number of times in the early 2000s and his title was, "What is it we deserve? What do we deserve?" Gilbert wrote that to pursue economic ends the pursuit of economic ends must always be in balance with a sense of responsibility for the planet and for the interdependent web. He writes, nature is not a commodity, but a sacred trust emerging from the creative process of which we are a part. Earth's bounty is not a private commodity, but the common inheritance of humankind. The economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, he wrote. The earth is more important than Wall Street. But the tension between these two things, an economy and a sense of stewardship and trust and compassion, really sets one of the equations for our work, our justice work as Unitarian Universalists. And we have to constantly ask, how does capitalism square with democracy? And how do we move toward a moral economy? In a nation where our government is weak, where the cries of the powerful and rich are for more freedom, it is up to the people to support the workers and each other, to strive toward equity and compassion in human relations, and to build a moral world with a moral economy. Happy Labor Day. I hope that you continue to be safe, that you send your hearts out into the world in peace, that you support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings, that you consider how our faith calls us forward to pursue justice, equity, and compassion, and in our own mission statement, to build that larger world of peace, justice, and love. Have a great day and a good weekend.